makes the point that the mainstream understanding of Islam is problematic. The statistic that he uses obfuscates political realities with religious ones. What do you think Malcolm X would say to someone like Mar, and how he's sort of framing this conversation?
I mean, I think the first move, of course, is to try to get inside of the skin of Brother Bill Maher and try to understand why it is he has such an intense hostility toward religion per se, and then why he targets Islam in particular. Because for him, when he looks at religion per se, he sees its promotion of domination, subordination, hatred, and revenge. Now, of course, we know the history of all religions in the species is one in which it has often accommodated religion to domination, subordination, hatred, and revenge. This is true for Christianity, this is true for Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, across the board, you see. On the other hand, we also know, and this is why I think Malcolm and the others would come back and say, well, wait a minute though, Brother Bill, you know that I, Malcolm X, prophetic, revolutionary, progressive. You say, yes, that's true. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, we can go on and on and on. Dorothy Day, Daniel Berrigan, Fannie Lou Hamer, you know that yourself. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, we can go on and on of people who were willing to be critical of their own religious tradition in the name of justice, and all of them got in trouble. All of them got in trouble. You recall when Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel gave his lecture right across the street, April 1948, when the Jewish terrorist group Ergon that killed 250 precious Arab men and women and innocent men. He cried, couldn't finish his lecture, and walked home and said, I counseled the class. I don't know when I'm coming back. That's April 1948. That's a month before the official founding of the State of Israel. And he knew the fundamental question was going to be, okay, Israel, are you going to coexist with indigenous peoples, or are you going to dominate? Einstein said coexist. Jabotinsky said dominate. Who won out? Jabotinsky. They've been dominating ever since. You see what I mean? And then occupying after 67 and so forth. So that I think Bill Maher would have to say, well, of course there have been some religious figures, but they are the exception. They're so small, they're so... And you say, well, that's human history. That is human history. Human history is one in which domination, subordination, hatred, and revenge has been stronger than freedom, democracy, love, and justice. Doesn't mean that love and justice hasn't had an effect and consequence, but we still live in a world of empires, patriarchy, homophobia, class subordination, and so on, you see. And so that's the history of who we are as a species. And that's true whether you're religious or not.
Do you find it interesting that Islam has come up recently, you know, in the last few weeks, twice now on Bill Maher's show, and not one Muslim was actually there to kind of address it?
No. But there's a variety of different distinguished Islamic thinkers and voices and figures who need to be not on the edges, at the center of this discussion. You know what I mean? I give up my seat in a minute to an Islamic voice that would be talking about, you know, freedom and democracy and equality as it relates to the very rich and complicated Islamic tradition.
Do you think this is a structural problem? The outcome of the imperial presence overseas? Do you think it's the media, the ongoing media debate that we keep hearing, Muslims are not given their own? I mean, what is it structurally the reason why?
I think the media bears a lot of responsibility for this, and unfortunately, much of the media, not all, you can see it with Amy Goodman and some other shows, but so much of the media is market driven, you know, and to the degree to which the Muslims are a constituency who watch TV, who buy products that advertisers want to sell. Once that becomes even stronger, then lo and behold, you have more weight and leverage in terms of who's actually on. I mean, this is neoliberal capitalist society that we live in. It's ruled by money and big money.
And if you also look at the, you know, those who, yourself, Ben Affleck, Hollywood, you know, actor, are you noticing the trends on those who are kind of standing up for saying, you know, this kind of logic is just not right? I mean, how are you framing, this concept of where Muslims are right now? Are you noticing a trend on those voices who are coming up for, and
sure.
Muslims aside,
Yeah,
out of
non-Muslims.
yeah,
Yes.
who are supporting, and those who are kind of building up their case against Islam?
Well, I tell you, I mean, I have a number of non-Muslim brothers and sisters of all colors who come up to me and say, we so deeply appreciate what you're saying. Of course, you're concerned about what is true and just, and the Islamic tradition can be a force for good or a force for evil, just like Christianity, Judaism, and any other. And when Brother Bill Maher says to me, well, of course, with ISIS and with Al-Qaeda, we're at a moment now where Islam poses more of a threat than Christianity, more of a threat than Judaism or whatever. You said it's relative to context. You see, in Gaza, it's fundamentalist Judaism, and Judaism as a force for occupation. That in the context of U.S. foreign policy as it relates to Syria, yeah, we all agree ISIS is genocidal and fascist and barbaric. In fact, they kill more Muslim brothers and sisters than non-Muslims, actually. So it's at that point, it's a moral and spiritual issue that cuts within the Muslim world as well as Muslim and non-Muslim distinctions. But in other parts of the world, in India, it's still a caste question. With our precious Dalit brothers and sisters, it's Hinduism. And fundamentalist Hinduism, that's a force for subordination and domination. So it depends what your context actually is. And you have to be able to keep track of the truth. I mean, as I said before, there's a truth in what Brother Bill Maher is saying in terms of religion as a force for domination. Of course we all agree with that. It's just, you can't be so narrow and exclusivistic in viewing it as somehow it cannot be a force, and I would say a major force for good.
Last question on Bill Maher.
Sure.
What do you think is his end result? I mean, what's the end game?
I think the fundamental motivation of my dear brother Bill Maher is he wants to point out the hypocrisy of secular liberals who he thinks don't want to be more explicit about Islam as a force for subordination. Now, I mean, the irony is you got a whole lot of liberals who talk that way, a whole lot of neoliberals who talk that way.
Right.
But for him, within the left, he sees leftists who don't want to come out and talk about just how ugly the deeds of ISIS and so forth are. They want to engage in critiques of American empire and what have you. And I think that's his fundamental thing. He wants to point out that hypocrisy among the left. And yet, in the end, we have to be concerned about truth and concerned about justice. And I'm really concerned about how do we deepen and expand prophetic thought and prophetic deeds in the Islamic tradition, because it has a history of it, and it's a matter of continuing to build on it.